Hey everyone, how's it going? Thanks so much for tuning in. In today's video, we're going to be taking an in-depth look at literally the most fun car I've ever driven, the 1991 Honda Beat. So what in the world is a Honda Beat? Well, it's a mid-engine, rear-wheel drive convertible K car that was only sold in Japan between 1991 and 1996. I'll talk about the K car class in just a little bit, but I will say, this thing is a whole new definition of compact. It makes a first-generation Mazda Miata look big, if that tells you anything. But they just became legal to import into the United States within the last few years, so we're starting to see them pop up here and there. The point of this video is to give you guys an in-depth look at the car and cover everything you ever wanted to know about it. I'm also going to take it on a thorough drive. We're going to get some sound clips because surprisingly enough, this thing sounds really, really cool. And of course, I'll cover all the unique aspects throughout the interior as well as exterior. Before we begin though, a huge thanks to Cosmo Motors of Hickory, North Carolina for providing this opportunity today. For more information about the dealership, including contact info and current inventory, I included a link in the description box below. And so, without further ado, let's go ahead and hop on in, start her up, and let her run. Excited does not even begin to describe my mood right now. Just look at this thing. It's so tiny. This one's obviously finished in silver. There were a handful of color options throughout its production. I think some limited edition colors as well. But that interior, my goodness, how cool is that? Zebra print cloth upholstery. Wow. Obviously, being a JDM car, the Beat's right-hand drive, which is a pretty unique experience in itself. Now for the moment of truth. Let's hop in this thing. Okay. Well, to be honest, it's not quite as cramped feeling as I thought it'd be. I'm sure if the top was on, that'd be a different story, but as far as leg room and stuff, not too bad. This thing is just so neat. It kind of reminds me of a go-kart. I love how the speedometer cluster sits on top of the steering column, which is not adjustable. What you see is what you get, but you have that tachometer front and center, speed readout on the right, as well as your fuel and temperature off to the left. It's a pretty simple car, but honestly, they had this thing pretty well stocked for what it is. Standard features, audio system down below there, air conditioning, you have power windows, the switches are down in the console here, visors, a laminated windshield, like a lot of stuff. Let's go ahead and hop in the passenger side real quick. It's so strange, this is where I would normally be getting in. Where's the steering wheel? As far as interior design, the double hooded dash and the waterfall console is pretty cool. So this upper portion wraps around the outer sections, the driver and passenger side, and then the waterfall portion comes down. You have your radio, the climate controls, and everything else on back. Again, interior space, pretty decent actually. I'm 5'10", and there you go. I can stretch my leg out pretty good. I have the seat all the way back. This leg is up just a little bit, but not too bad. And surprisingly enough, you have a small glove box. Fairly decent storage. Coming up the A-pillars, you have those visors. They don't have any mirrors or anything like that. They're just simple sun visors. And in the middle, you have a manually dimming rearview mirror. But enough with the interior for now. We'll dive back into that in just a moment. Now we're going to check out the exterior. And of course, I'll go ahead and flip on the headlamps, as well as the hazards. first things first, let's dive into the powertrain. Underneath the hood, or trunk for that matter, you'll find a 656cc inline 3-cylinder. That's 40 cubic inches. Tiny little thing. The engine is naturally aspirated. It's actually the only one in the competitive set that wasn't turbocharged. Instead, it had a pretty unique setup that Honda employed called MyTrek. It stood for Multi-Throttle Responsive Engine Control. There's actually plates on the door thresholds that spell it out. Basically, you have a drive-by-wire throttle system with an individual throttle body on each cylinder. Now that was pretty innovative stuff for the time, and it allowed the Beat, even though it wasn't turbocharged, to hold its own against the competition. Also back here, you have a dedicated tray for probably one of the world's smallest car batteries, and a very small amount of storage space. It is carpeted. You could probably fit an umbrella and maybe a couple little knickknacks, but not much more than that. You have your coolant reservoir here, as well as your oil fill tube. Everything is written in Japanese, which is super cool, and you have some louvered vents right there to help keep the engine bay cool. Since we really can't see much of anything else with the engine right now, let's talk about the rest of the details on the road. This is so weird, driving on the right side. Oh my gosh, this is so much fun. I've never had so much fun. Yep, we're still revving. Woo! I've never had so much fun with so little power in my life. Listen to how cool that sounds. So what kind of power are we actually looking at here? A total of 64 horsepower at 8,100 RPM and 44 pound-feet of torque at 7,000 RPM. Wow. I'm sorry, I don't even know what to say. This is just mind-numbingly fun. And it handles great too. Dang. I apologize if the road is a little rough. We'll try to keep things as smooth as possible. It takes about 13 seconds or so to hit 60 miles an hour, and top speed is electronically limited to 84 miles per hour. So this is not a fast car by anyone's measure, but woo boy, is it fun. It's so much fun. I mean, the car only weighs 1,675 pounds. It weighs nothing. And I mean, it takes corners like nobody's business. Like, I can't believe what I'm feeling right now. This is awesome. I've driven some really fast cars over the years, and nothing compares to the fun of this. My goodness. Wow. See, this is one of those cars that it's not about 0 to 60. It's not about top speed. If you measure everything compared to stats, of course you're going to be disappointed. But when you're on the road and can experience this car for what it was made to do, you truly understand that it's just about the experience. The open air experience, listening to that 3-cylinder back there that actually produces an amazing sound. It's great. I mean, I have the windows up right now to help reduce wind buffeting so you guys can hear me on the camera. There is relatively, I mean, I don't know what I'm trying to say. There's almost no disturbance within the interior as far as wind buffeting. I have my hat on, but I mean, I can feel a little bit right here. Nothing here at all. Like, there's no windscreen or anything like that. I guess they just really nailed the aerodynamics of this thing. It's a single overhead cam engine with 4 valves per cylinder and multi-port fuel injection, and as nature intended, it only came in a 5-speed manual transmission, which I might add is fantastic. To be perfectly honest, this is the longest I've ever driven something that was right-hand drive, I had the wonderful chance a while back through Cosmo to drive an R34 GTR for just a brief period of time, which was legendary to say the least, but I digress. It's really not that hard to drive something right-hand drive. It takes a little bit to get used to, but once you're in the groove, you don't even notice that you're on this side. I mean, just don't forget where you're going. It's the same gear pattern as it would be otherwise, so instead of shifting with your right hand like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's the same pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're just doing it with your left hand. Probably the only thing I really haven't gotten used to yet with driving a right-hand drive car is that the headlights and turn signal lever is on the right side and the wipers are on the left. So I've caught myself numerous times slapping the wipers on when I go to flip a turn signal. To be honest, you really can't describe this car any better than what Honda put right here. Beat. Midship amusement. In order to understand what the Beat is all about, you have to first understand what it means to actually be a K car. And I'm not talking about Chrysler's K cars, totally different thing. This is a class that was developed in Japan a long time ago that put restrictions on things like overall length, weight, engine size, and even power. The short of it is that anything that fit in the K car class, this could be roadsters like this, the Suzuki Cappuccino and the Mazda Autozan, to microvans, pickup trucks, hatchbacks, anything with the K car class fit in a unique tax bracket that was a lot lower than regular cars, because obviously they don't take up near as much real estate, and in a place that's as crowded as Japan, that's pretty important. Aside from just being taxed less, K cars were cheaper to buy, cheaper to own, cheaper to register, cheaper to insure. There was a lot of pros with buying something in this class, but this car, along with the AutoZam and the Cappuccino, they were kind of a niche market. And with the Beat in particular, they sold a little over 33,600 units during the span of production, so between 1991 and 1996, but 2/3 of those sales were in the first model year, 1991, so they obviously dropped off super hard after that, which is unfortunate. You know, times change, tastes change, and all that stuff, but we're never ever gonna see something like this produced ever again. I mean, we didn't see this in the beginning anyway, since it was only in Japan, but it's cool that we have the ability to import stuff like this and get a taste of what things were like back in the day, because this is incredibly fun. It has zero assistance features, no safety features or anything like that, just totally bare bones and made for driving. Driving for pleasure is just about the only thing you can do, because it is not a practical car by anyone's measure. You have that little bit of trunk space that I showed you guys earlier, and even though this clamshell does open, there's no additional storage space, but we'll pop that in just a moment. I will say also, packaging for this thing is pretty impressive. You already don't have a whole lot of real estate to work with, so engineers had to get a little creative with where to put things. For example, engine placement. The engine actually sits a little offset to the left in this vicinity. To the right of it is the fuel tank. Now, by putting them next to each other like that, they're able to better balance the car's weight, and of course, having the battery on this side also plays a factor in all of that too. Total tank capacity is actually really small. It's around 5 gallons or so, and the filler neck is right here. Now let's go ahead and pop that front clamshell. Like I said, you don't have any additional cargo space up here, but you do have some access to some key things. Let me go ahead and get that prop rod up. So up here, you have storage for your spare tire, your windshield washer bottle reservoir, and access to your brake fluid, the booster, and master cylinder. Back to packaging, the radiator sits underneath this spare tire at an angle in line with the open air inlets in the front fascia. The air comes in, hits the radiator, and exits underneath the vehicle. There's your coolant filler neck right there. I love the clamshell. It's such a cool styling touch. As far as the suspension, the Beat's setup is actually pretty nice. It's a 4-wheel independent suspension with McPherson struts at all 4 corners and a multi-link car is very flat. It feels planted. It doesn't drive like a light little tin can or anything. It feels nice and solid. And it really doesn't ride bad at all. It doesn't jitter or anything like that. Really, really good road manners. It's just a well-balanced car. The steering is actually manual. There's no power assistance, and it feels great. Communicates the road really, really well. It's quite precise. Going back and forth, there's no lag at all. Super tight. Steel wheels came standard, and it's hilarious just how small they are. 13 by 4.5 inches, riding on 155/65 tires. The bullet hole design is pretty cool. You have a machined outer lip, and the center is like a metallic silver. The wheels and tires are the same at all four corners, but what I find more interesting even than the fact that it has small wheels is that you actually have disc brakes at all four corners. Wow. Continuing across the rear, there's some small taillights right there, and a deckwood spoiler with a third brake light. There's some extra exhausting vents down below there just to help keep the engine bay nice and cool. Single chrome tailpipe, and little mud flaps across the bottom of the fascia. Naturally, the convertible top is manual. You can just grab it with one hand and pull it forward. You still have to latch it at the front and fasten a handful of buttons, but this gives you an idea of what it looks like when the top is up. I'm quite surprised. There's decent headroom in here with this top up. Again, I'm 5'10", and I still probably have a couple inches or so of wiggle room, so yeah, it is a tiny car, but I don't feel nearly as cramped as I thought I would. From what I've gathered in my research, these are pretty solid cars. Parts are decently available, you know, with anything of this age, and being that it wasn't ever offered in the States, some parts can be a little hard to track down, but some people say that parts from like newer Honda Fits and Civics can be transferred over to this. I'm not sure what parts those are. It's definitely worth researching, but interesting to know nonetheless. Also, I think, well, the biggest piece of preventative maintenance on these engines is the timing belt. They have to be serviced at a little bit more frequent intervals, I guess, than some cars. But yeah, so if you're interested in buying one, double check to see if the timing belt had been serviced. It's just one of those things to keep an eye out for. All right, back to the interior. Let's cover this side a little bit more in depth. Of course, door panel just as basic as the other side. You have manual bucket seats for both sliding and recline. And I just cannot get over how cool that fabric looks. They're one-piece buckets with good lateral bolstering. They're actually really comfortable. Of course, we have the most important thing down here, the 3 pedals, with a dead pedal off to the left. In between the seats, you have a storage compartment with enough spaces to put almost an entire library of cassette tapes. All the controls are just as simple as they look. And the radio is pretty neat too. It's integrated into the flow of the center stack. You have your power button here, different presets, volume off to the far right, and your tape deck up top. It's a little hard to see right now, but there's a digital display right in the middle. Now let's go ahead and see how she sounds. less miles you get make up for the lack of power and stuff. If you got some spare cash and you want a fun summer toy, I don't think you can beat this. Ha, beat, ha, ha. So punny. Anyway, the only downside really is because these are imported, expect to pay a little bit of a higher price than you might would think for something of this size. But again, to each his own. If I could, I'd buy this in a heartbeat. It's too fun. Way too fun. Well, everyone, that concludes this video. I hope you enjoyed the in-depth look at the 1991 Honda Beat. Be sure to stay tuned next time, and if you haven't subscribed already, consider doing so, because there's always a lot more where that came from, not just with reviews, but projects as well. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like below. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.